Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our Big 12 football predictions today, and our next team returns one of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation, and if they can stay healthy, will be legitimate Big 12 title contenders. They are the West Virginia Mountaineers. For months, I have talked about how high I am on this West Virginia team and how they have a legitimate chance to win the Big 12 this season. And they certainly have the team to do it with 7 returning starters on offense and 5 returning starters on defense. And as we all know, the offense being led by arguably the best quarterback in the entire nation in Will Grier, who last year put up 3,490 yards through the air along with 34 touchdowns, and that was all with missing 3 games. He actually missed the final 2 games of the regular season plus the bowl game against Utah. So his stats could have been a lot better before he went down with injury, but obviously very impressive for the games that he played in. And if you want to know how just big of a difference Will Grier makes for this West Virginia team, they were averaging 39 points per game with Grier as quarterback last season. Without Grier, when he was down with an injury, they were averaging just 19.7 points per game. So a huge difference there, about 20-point difference between playing with Grier and without Grier. So he is going to be the difference maker for this West Virginia team if he can stay healthy. If not, it could be a very disappointing year for the Mountaineers. They do lose their star running back in Justin Crawford, but will replace him with Alex Sinkfield, who I think will replace that gap fairly nicely there. Obviously, some solid wide receivers for Will Grier, maybe one of the better wide receiving corps in the nation. Gary Jennings was the leading wide receiver last year with 1,000+ yards through the receiving, but only 1 receiving touchdown. David Sills, on the other hand, who a lot of people know, was not the leading receiver, but had 18 touchdowns. So Will Grier, plenty of receivers to throw to, tons of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Also, they have 4 offensive linemen, so Grier's going to have plenty of protection there for what's going to be a very pass-happy offense under Dana Holgorsen. The defense only returns 5 starters this season. 3 of those 5 starters are in the linebacking core. You have David Long, who finished 3rd in tackles last season for the Mountaineers. You have Dylan Tonkery, and then Drayvon Askew-Henry also leading that linebacking core, rounding out the returning starters there. You also have Reese Donahue, a leader on the defensive line, and then Kenny Robinson is going to be a leader in the secondary. And despite only returning 5 starters from last year's team on the defensive side of the ball, 7 players out of the 11 on the defensive side of the ball will be upperclassmen. So still plenty of experience for this defense that Dana Holgorsen has slowly built up over the years. And they definitely need some improvement on that side of the ball because they allowed 31.5 points per game last year, and I do expect those numbers to decrease a little bit and maybe hold opponents a little under 30 points per game. So that's going to be a huge improvement for the Mountaineers. And they open the season with a very intriguing game against Tennessee, one that would look good on a resume despite how Tennessee does this year. Anytime you can get a win over an SEC opponent, it's always good. Tennessee under new management with Jeremy Pruitt coming over from Alabama. A very intriguing game being played in Charlotte. This is a game that Tennessee's offense, it could be sneaky good in week 1. You know, I don't expect a whole lot out of the Volunteers this season. I don't expect them to have a breakthrough year. I really don't even have them making a bowl game this season. But I think Jeremy Pruitt is the right man for the job. They're going to have Keller Christ at quarterback or Jarrett Garantano. Depends on who Jeremy Pruitt chooses. I think it's going to be Keller Christ, but we'll have to wait and find out. Their top 2 wide receivers are back in Brandon Johnson and Marquez Callaway. So this is a Tennessee offense that returns 6 starters and could be fairly dangerous, especially if Chris is at quarterback, who had some playing time at Stanford. The defense, of course, Jeremy Pruitt, a defensive-minded coach, should be fairly solid here. This is a game that if West Virginia's defense isn't up to par yet, maybe the Tennessee offense can put up some points against them. But overall, I think this West Virginia offense will once again be the difference maker. It's going to go up against a Jeremy Pruitt defense that's new, a Tennessee defense that's new under the Jeremy Pruitt era. And I think this offense, led by Will Grier, who's looking to bounce back from that injury, gets a big-time win over a solid SEC opponent. So they start off the season 1-0. And 2-0 with a win over Youngstown State. Then on the road at North Carolina State. Now, this is one of those sneaky good games as well that isn't getting a lot of attention here, but could be a lot of fun to watch, especially at the quarterback position. You're putting 2 of the better quarterbacks in the entire nation up against each other, with Will Grier from West Virginia and then Ryan Finley at North Carolina State, who was by far one of the more accurate passers in the nation last year. North Carolina State also, like Tennessee, returning their top 2 wide receivers. But here's the kicker. North Carolina State only returns 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball this season. Now, all 3 of those players are in the secondary, so that could be bad news for Will Grier and this pass-happy offense here. But only 3 returning starters. That doesn't mean North Carolina State's defense is going to be horrible, but I don't think they're going to be as experienced as they were last year when they had Bradley Chubb and some of those solid starters along the defensive line. I do think West Virginia goes on the road and gets another solid win against another very solid Power 5 opponent. So right there, you've got a win over an ACC school and an SEC school, one at a neutral site and one on the road. So neither of those playing on their home turf. So that would be huge for West Virginia's resume that they're trying to pad up to maybe make a run for the college football playoff. They open Big 12 play against Kansas State. And this is a game that West Virginia won last year, 28-23. So a fairly low-scoring game, close game, and a Kansas State team that I'm very high on this year. I really think could have a fairly solid year, 8-win, 9-win season. Bill Snyder, one of the most legendary head coaches of all time, going to do some great work with his Wildcats team this year. And this is a game that I really could see being a shootout because West Virginia and Kansas State both only return 5 starters in the defensive side of the ball, but are going to have very, very potent offenses for both of these teams. You got Alex Delton and Alex Barnes for Kansas State at the running back and quarterback position there, and you've got this West Virginia offense, as I've said repeatedly, I'm super, super high on as long as Will Grier can stay healthy. I don't see many teams being able to shut down super effectively. They can slow them down, but not completely shut down Will Grier and his wide receiving core for the Mountaineers this season. They're going to be very, very dangerous. This game, I think, has the recipe for a potential shootout because of the defenses, but I think West Virginia gets another win over Kansas State, much like they did last year, and they start off the season 4-0 and 1-0 in Big 12 play. And then to close out September, they're on the road at Texas Tech, and this is a trap game for me. Texas Tech team that returns 6 starters on offense, 10 on defense, and are playing for Cliff Kingsbury's job. This might be the last year of the Cliff Kingsbury era, and I keep reiterating that because it is a big deal, and every game matters for Kingsbury and the Red Raiders. It's on the road, not an easy place to play by any means at Jones AT&T Stadium. This is a Texas Tech defense that I think will surprise a lot of people and will, once again, not completely shut down this West Virginia offense, but slow them down enough to get a win over the Mountaineers. And you have to keep in mind, Texas Tech defense, even though they only return 6 starters, will be fairly potent as well as they always have been under Cliff Kingsbury. So they're going to give them their first loss to the Red Raiders. A win over Kansas, don't discuss much about that. Maybe we'll improve a little bit under David Beatty going into year 4, but not enough to beat the Mountaineers. At Iowa State, this is a major trap game as well. As we all know, Iowa State, one of the most difficult places to play, I would even say in the nation. I mean, I know they've had some rough years in previous years, but last year, a heck of a year for the Cyclones. They're always a difficult place to play. I love Kyle Kempt. I love David Montgomery. And then you've got Marcel Spears leading this Iowa State defense that could be sneaky good as well. Last year, West Virginia only winning 20-16 when Iowa State was number 14 in the country. That was fresh off of that TCU victory for the Cyclones. I think this is a revenge game for Iowa State. This is an Iowa State team that no one's going to sleep on, but will still have another solid year. Should get back to a bowl game. And I think West Virginia goes on the road and loses to what will once again be a very solid Cyclones team. They're just not going to shock anybody like they did last year because they kind of came out of nowhere. Then a bye week. Much needed bye week after losing 2 of their past 3 games. Coming off a loss, always good. Then they get a game against Baylor. This is the Baylor team, you know, that hung with West Virginia last year. I believe only losing by 2 points last year, 38-36. And obviously went 1-11. West Virginia, a week of rest, going up against a Baylor team at home who, yes, will be improved, but not improved enough to defeat a very, very solid Mountaineers team. Yes, they returned 17 starters for the Bears. Yes, Matt Rule is going to have them back in shape and in contention to get to a bowl game. But I just don't see them having enough power on either side of the ball to compete with West Virginia. And, of course, the Mountaineers going to be angry after their loss to Iowa State and a week of rest. Recipe for a victory for West Virginia. A win there. And then on the road to Texas, you enter November. They only have 2 losses, so certainly still in contention for the Big 12 championship. Maybe not for the college football playoff, but certainly the Big 12 championship. And this is where you meet probably the toughest teams in the Big 12. You got Texas, TCU, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma. So this November schedule for the Mountaineers, brutal, absolutely brutal. And they open up against Texas. And you know, this is a Texas team that everybody says is overhyped, overrated, going to choke. They don't have any talent, whatever you want to say. But this is, I've said before, this is a completely different Texas team. The culture and the intensity and the mindset has changed for the Longhorns. At least that's what I believe under the Tom Herman era. I think he's done a phenomenal job with this program, even though he's only been there for 1 year. I think he really takes a huge step forward this year for the Longhorns, and I think they get the win over the Mountaineers. It's on the road. I know they're coming off a victory over Baylor, and this is a game that I really think can go back and forth, especially with the offensive side of the ball, because I'm extremely high on Texas's offense as well. Shane Buechele or Sam Ellinger, whoever it may be, at the quarterback position. Solid wide receivers as well for Texas. Tom Herman, obviously more of an offensive-minded coach as well. But with it being on the road, I just don't like West Virginia's chances here against a Texas team that's going to be extremely dangerous and who I think is probably Oklahoma's biggest threat for the first place in the standings. And I'm going to give West Virginia their third loss to the Longhorns. I'm going to give them a win over TCU, though. This is a TCU team that, is going to be more or less the same than they were last year. I think they're going to probably take a little bit of a step back because they lose Kenny Hill, the quarterback position. They lose some key starters along the offensive line and on the defensive side of the ball. They've got to break in a new quarterback in Sean Robinson. They might be more run heavy with Darius Anderson at the running back position and Kevontae Turpin, a solid wide receiver there as well. But you're breaking in a new quarterback and an offensive line that only has 2 returning starters. Their defense will certainly be the strength. Maybe they can slow down Will Grier in this Mountaineers offense, but it's at home. They're angry after a loss. I feel more confident picking the Mountaineers in this one than I do TCU, who I think will take a little bit of a step back. Then on the road to Oklahoma State, this is a potential tough game as well for the Mountaineers. An Oklahoma State team, though, that loses their star quarterback in Mason Rudolph, loses their star wide receiver in James Washington, loses a lot of offensive firepower. Yes, they bring in Taylor Cornelius at the quarterback position or Drew Brown, the transfer from Hawaii. They also have Justice Hill at the running back position. So the offense under Mike Gundy isn't going to take that big of a drop, but still they lose a lot of production, a lot of key production there. And I don't have as much faith in their defense as I've had in the past. Even though it's on the road, I think West Virginia wants to try to finish strong, gets a huge win over the Cowboys, and then closes out the year the day after Thanksgiving against Oklahoma. This is where it gets interesting. The past 2 years, West Virginia has lost to Oklahoma by 28 points each. 28 points last year, 28 points the year before. They've gotten blown out by the Sooners. The year before that, so 3 years ago, they lost by 20. So it really hasn't been close in recent memory, these West Virginia versus Oklahoma matchups. West Virginia will be hungry. This is an Oklahoma State team that isn't like they were last year. Yes, they lose Baker Mayfield. They still have plenty of talent. Don't get me wrong. I still think they're probably the top dogs in the Big 12. But I think this is a hungry West Virginia team that wants to finish off on the right note, that depending on how Oklahoma and Texas, some of these other guys do, could still be in contention for the Big 12 championship game. And I think West Virginia upset the Sooners at home. I think this is such a dominant offense here, and an Oklahoma team that does have some questions on defense, has plenty of talent, don't get me wrong there. And by this point, if they have any questions on either side of the ball for Oklahoma, will have been fixed. But I think this is a West Virginia team that's going to catch Oklahoma a little bit by surprise, maybe catch them napping day after Thanksgiving. And I like this West Virginia team to get a huge win over the Sooners to close out the year. And that's going to give them a 9-3 record on the 2018 season, which is a solid year. I mean, compared to that 7-6 record they had last year, obviously a huge improvement. I think that record could have been better had Will Grier not gotten hurt. They lost to Texas 28-14, got annihilated by Utah in their bowl game. So a 9-3 record, a potential for a 10-win season. Obviously, something to get excited about for Dana Holgorsen and this West Virginia squad. And like I said, depending on how the other teams in the Big 12 do, could maybe sneak into the Big 12 championship game. Looking at the losses we have here, maybe they are able to pull off the win over Iowa State or Texas Tech. I don't see them pulling off both of those. I don't see them going on the road and beating Texas. So I think the worst case scenario could be a lot worse than 9-3. I think 9-3 is probably about the mark right now. Best case scenario, probably about 10-2 for the Mountaineers. But I think 9-3 is very respectable. And obviously, like I said, still a chance at the Big 12 championship and obviously the potential for a 10-win season, which is something to get very, very excited about if you are a Mountaineers fan. And I cannot wait to see how West Virginia fares this season. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.